We got a great show coming up for you on American Black Journal. We're going to hear about a local effort to make sure that Black businesses and nonprofits get the funding they need. We'll get an update also on workplace diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. And the Dance Theatre of Harlem is coming to Detroit. Stay where you are. American Black Journal starts right now.
From Delta Faucets to Behr Paint, Masco Corporation is proud to deliver products that enhance the way consumers all over the world experience and enjoy their living spaces. Masco, serving Michigan communities since 1929.
Support also provided by the Cynthia and Edsel Ford Fund for Journalism at Detroit Public TV.
The DTE Foundation proudly supports 50 years of American Black Journal in covering African American history, culture, and politics. The DTE Foundation and American Black Journal partners in presenting African American perspectives about our communities and in our world.
Also brought to you by AAA, NISSAN Foundation, and viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to American Black Journal. I'm Stephen Henderson, and as always, thanks for joining us. You know, funding is one of the most consistent challenges for Black businesses and nonprofits. And my next guest has made it his mission to bridge that gap. Dwan Dandridge founded Black Leaders Detroit to come up with equitable solutions to the financial challenges that Black businesses face. I sat down with him to hear about his efforts and what the outlook is for 2022. Dwan Dandridge, welcome to American Black Journal.
Stephen, thanks for having me. Happy New Year to you.
Yeah, so I'm glad that you're here because you and I had a conversation in a board meeting about a month ago that made me think I wanted our viewers here on American Black Journal to hear the things you were saying. You were talking to the board of the Hudson Weber Foundation about the challenges, the specific challenges that Black businesses and nonprofits face in making sure they have enough money. And you weren't just talking about the typical barriers, you were talking about things like networking and connections and the kind of intrinsic things that make it easier for people who are part of the majority population to get things started and keep them going. I thought it was one of the most insightful things I had heard about Black businesses and nonprofits.
Yeah, well, thanks. I mean, I think, we're aware in the work that we do that there are systemic issues that are just persistent, and we're constantly trying to overcome those. But I also think that there's some nuance to things. I think one of the things that when you're talking about capital, access to capital, now that everybody's kind of like taking it as a core value to be about equity and equality, I think that some of the organizations that are out there just aren't necessarily ready to pull it off or don't know how to. So one of the things that I try to encourage the Black entrepreneur, be it for profit or the nonprofit sector, is to be very intentional about the way that they network, right? I think that's a part of the lack of access is our networks. The way I view it is part of the problem, part of the solution to the problem is what we organically bring to the table through our lived experience, our understanding to those systemic issues that are there. We have a wealth of that. So like I can pick up my phone and reach out at any given time to a number of people that understand our plight and have come up with some of the solutions, right? Be it, as a practitioner, right? Like solving the problem because, it was a struggle that they had personally or someone in their family. But that's a part of the solution. The thing that we don't often have is the people in our phone that we can reach out to that can provide seed money, right? For our business, for profit or nonprofit. And I think that's one of the things that I've been able to learn as I've been on this journey, and I often try to share it. But I think, as our allies or our partners that are out there looking to to solve the problem, one of the things I challenge them to do often is to understand that we don't come to the table empty-handed. Oftentimes, the posture in these conversations are, the money is a need for us to do the work or us to, run our business. But I think that there's a need on the other side, right? Oftentimes, the foundations are tasked with saying we're going to use these dollars to change the world. And what I understand, and some of the people that I work with understand, if not, I try to encourage them or push them a little bit to understand that you can't do it without us, right? Like those of us that are out here and committed our lives to solving the problems, like we come to the table, answer to your need and what you're lacking, right? So it's important that the posture is a certain way for anybody that we're looking to partner with. And that was a conversation I had with some folks over at Hudson Weber before we got to the board meeting, and I was happy that they responded like a real partner would.
Yeah. So let's talk specifically about how Black Leaders Detroit works. What is it that you're doing to help Black businesses and nonprofits bridge that gap, to make those connections that they don't always have intrinsically?
Yeah. So basically, we are the pot of money. That's what we desire to be, a pot of money that the Black entrepreneurs in Detroit can look to when they need funding. And the way that we go about that is, the way we're structured is we provide grants for the nonprofit sector, and a no interest loan that we're excited to roll out this month and start receiving applications for our no interest loan product. That's going to launch this month. That's the way for for-profits. That's the way we were originally set up. But we decided to pivot April of 2020 when we saw the devastation that the pandemic was causing on the small business community. And we decided to provide grants for the small business community as well as the nonprofit sector. And, we're excited to say that we've given away over $400,000 to Black-owned businesses or led nonprofits since April of 2020. And all of those were grant dollars that we have raised with through our membership, but also some of the foundations and corporate sponsorships.
Yeah. And so that's meeting the immediate needs of these businesses and nonprofits. But what about that bigger picture that you were talking about developing those networks, developing those connections, so that the next person who says, I got a business idea or I want to start a nonprofit, has more access to that other capital?
Agreed. I think, again, being intentional about that, right? One of the things that we have to see as a responsibility, if we are raising money for our business or a nonprofit that we're leading or we're a part of, when you're able to create that network and you have access and you get in front of the people that are able to write big checks, they see that there's talent here, right? Like, we are very talented. We're really, really gifted. And we have the same drive, work ethic that as anybody else that they may be already writing checks to. Once they have the access to us in that way, what it does is now I'm able to reach out and make a call for the next person coming down the line. I'm able to make an introduction. And the other thing is I'm tearing down the narrative that, oftentimes our white colleagues have in their minds, or others, right, about us when it comes to the type of talent that we have, the ability that we have. We're giving them something to combat the narrative of the images that they've seen about us historically.
Yeah, it's a really great program. And one of the things I love about it is you saw a need and you filled it. There's so much opportunity to do that in our city, and not everybody is ready to jump in there the way you did. So congratulations. And of course, thanks from the community here in Detroit for all of the work that you're doing. Dwan Dandridge, thanks so much also for joining us here on American Black Journal.
Thanks for having me.
The murder of George Floyd by a Minneapolis police officer in May of 2020 led to an enormous outpouring of sentiment about making things more equal in the workplace. Lots of workplaces said that they were going to hire more minorities. They hired DEI consultants to help them do that and to make their workplaces more welcoming. And it was all in an effort to make racial equality more of a priority. So where do we stand with all of that? I caught up with consultant Mark Lee to talk about where we are in 2022 with diversity, equity, and inclusion. I want to start with what's different now, 2 years nearly after the death of George Floyd and all these promises that got made about change in the workplace, change in the makeup of the workplace, change in the dynamics in the workplace. They were big promises when they were made. Are they being fulfilled in 2022?
I think it's still too early to tell. I can tell you, though, there has been some progress since, the whole George Floyd situation, if you will. We have noticed an increase in terms of the number of DEI positions, over 100% increase in those types of positions were being filled. We've also noticed an increase, again, generally speaking now, we've noticed an increase in the resources being allocated by major organizations in this space. But in terms of have the total objectives and have they been totally fulfilled, it's still too early to tell. There's a long ways to go.
So to me, the thing that matters the most in the workplace is the actual diversity of the staff, right? It's great to have leaders who care about diversity and equity and inclusion and hire consultants or even full-time employees to work on those issues. But if their workplaces themselves are not diverse, then it kind of defeats the purpose, at least for me. Talk about how much talk there has been about changing the dynamics, and then how much of the outcome that we've seen become different, especially in C-suites, right? Executive suites all over the country still are places that it's hard to break into if you're not white.
And that's where the gap is. We're still seeing that gap, at the senior management level. They will talk about diversity. There were commitment statements that were certainly put out right after the George Floyd situation. But if you look at the statistical data, the majority of the C-suite level positions are still held by Caucasians. And that, and a lot more as you filter down into the organization, you will find some diversity at all levels of the organization, but it does not sync up where it needs to be at the senior level. So there's still that shortfall at the senior level. And it's been statistically proven, there was a study by the Boston Consulting Group that if you have a diverse senior leadership team, you have an opportunity of generating 17% more revenue because people want to do business with people that look like them. So it's one thing to talk about diversity, but it's another thing to actually have diverse leaders and then let that filter throughout the organization and engage all the employees throughout the process.
And hiring for diversity is an art in some ways. And I say that as somebody who's done a fair amount of hiring in my career. You have to do it differently if you're trying to create a diverse workforce. And I still wonder, I guess, whether enough hiring managers understand what that art looks like and what it really means to attract a diverse pool of candidates and then be able to select for diversity, all while not compromising other standards, not compromising excellence, which you don't have to do. It is possible and necessary to be able to hire at a high level and respect diversity. But I guess I just don't feel like enough people really understand how that works.
And that's another challenge that businesses are grappling with, is shifting the paradigm. I'm comfortable, but I'm saying comfortable, I'm not, me personally, I'm just saying in general, people are comfortable doing things the way they've always been done. They will talk about it, but yet we may recruit at the same colleges and universities. That's not a knock on those colleges and universities. There's a diverse group of universities where there's a wealth of talent that people need to begin to tap into. So I would challenge organizations and say, are you now recruiting much more aggressively at HBCUs, for example? Are you using your diverse talent to get out there in the marketplace and talk to people? Don't just sit in the C-suite. Don't just sit in that ivory tower and talk about that commitment statement. It's the challenge is to get out there, talk to students, mentor them, give them the opportunities to come into the workplace to demonstrate what they can do. So it is still a challenge. That challenge is shifting or changing the paradigm from the old way of thinking into one that evolves into becoming much more forward thinking.
So I also worried when George Floyd was killed and there was this real surge in attention to DEI issues, that it was happening at the same time that we were dealing with this awful pandemic, which of course we are still dealing with. It looks really different today than it did then, but it is still really shaping a lot of the decisions we make and the ways we live. And I guess the reason that made me worry was that something like a pandemic is a disruption to people's businesses, is a disruption to the workplace. And I know from experience that even the best intentioned workplaces and managers who are committed to DEI issues fall into the trap of sidelining that when there are other things, that need to be dealt with, right? And the pandemic challenged businesses in financial ways, in management ways, and all these other things. And I worried that the DEI issue would get buried at least a little during the pandemic. I wonder if we have any idea at how well they navigated that.
I think, again, as I stated at the top of this discussion, it's still too early to tell. Yeah. Here's my concern. You are absolutely spot on. And with the pandemic, it's a natural excuse to say we have other things to focus on. I would argue that this is another reason why you need to focus in this space. And because if we don't, you're missing out on business opportunities, okay? And I think the fact of the matter is, if we continue to keep our heads in the sand in this space, organizations are not going to proceed. My other concern is just, as it relates to the pandemic and people watching their budgets, a lot of the DEI practitioners that are going into the organizations still are not getting the budgets to implement what they need to do. So now the pandemic becomes a logical excuse to say, let's redirect our resources into other spaces. Someone inside the organization has to be strong enough and really challenge the leadership of the organization to say, we still need to invest in this space. And the way that we need to invest in this space is to have the right people in the right boxes and to have the financial resources. Now is not the time to cut the budget in this critical area.
So we've really got about a minute left, but I want to have you talk just a little about 2022, what people should be focused on, what they should be thinking about to keep things moving in this area.
And what they should be focused on in 2022 and beyond is having a strategic plan in this space. I'm not talking about just hiring people and say, go hire more diverse people. No, what is your overall strategy? How does it tie into the business strategy? Make sure that you continue to engage your employees and also hold the organization accountable. And lastly, identify key metrics to help ensure that we are successful in this space of diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Okay, Mark Lee, always great to get your insights on this and other issues. Thanks so much for joining us on American Black Journal.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
And finally, the world-renowned Dance Theatre of Harlem is coming to Detroit. They're coming to premiere their new ballet, Higher Ground, which is set to the music, you guessed it, of Motown great Stevie Wonder. The troupe was in Detroit in December to check things out, and they stopped by the place that Stevie got his start, Hitsville, USA. Producer AJ Walker was there.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 1.
The Dance Theatre of Harlem combined movement, melody, and history at the Motown Museum when they previewed some of the dance moves for their upcoming show at the Michigan Opera Theater.
All right, good. All right. Let's go now with just me not shouting. The premiere is a ballet to the music of Stevie Wonder. The title of it is Higher Ground, named after that great song by Stevie Wonder. And here we are in Studio A, where Stevie Wonder got his start. It is really quite remarkable to be in this space. I can smell the artistic intention and the artistic energy of the past years flooding forward and moving us forward into the future.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 1.
Robert Garland, resident choreographer of the troupe, said they chose the music of Stevie Wonder because his music has a message.
Now, we need his music more than ever. It is very rare you hear artists now that address in full frontal fashion the things that are going on at the time. And I felt that Stevie Wonder's music was appropriate for this moment.
I mean, you listen to Higher Ground and you watch their performance, and it's moving because so much of it is still so relevant.
The music that was created during the 70s, post-civil rights, was music that was ready to address absolutely everything about what wasn't happening after the great work of Dr. King and his assassination.
The song Higher Ground was written in 1973, just a few years after the Civil Rights Movement. It was on Stevie Wonder's Inner Visions album, which featured tracks that addressed social injustice.
I think we're in that moment right now, too, with the Black Lives Matter movement. It is exactly the same tone, exactly the same politic, just 50 years later.
Lindsay Donnell, senior company member with the Dance Theatre of Harlem, says the recent social justice protests had an impact on her passion for dance, especially this upcoming performance.
Living through the pandemic and the Black Lives Matter movement, I think it's changed the way all of us approach the piece and feel about the significance of the work, and that it's so meaningful, and like to represent a time and bring that forward into today, kind of with the same message, I think is really special for our company.
Yeah.
Their trip to the Motor City has been several years in the making. It was pushed back indefinitely due to the pandemic.
I'm happy to return to Detroit in 2021 because actually this ballet was to have premiered in 2020 in March. But we had to go back to New York City and wait until this moment due to the pandemic.
But now that they're here, they say the wait built up anticipation, and the history in this building filled them with inspiration and purpose.
Just being here in Detroit, coming to the Motown Museum, I think is really going to continue to inform our performance in January.
It's good to see the dancers get an opportunity to interact with their history. We can't lift the museum up and take it to New York, so we brought the dancers to Detroit.
Robin Terry, CEO of the Motown Museum, says their presence, coupled with the legacy of legendary Motown artists, was momentous.
Having Robert Garland and these really talented dancers from the Dance Theatre of Harlem right here in Detroit, in the belly of Motown at Hitsville, USA, to not only be inspired, but to give inspiration. I mean, their dance was absolutely stunning. And for these young people to have an opportunity to be here in Detroit at the place where Stevie Wonder got his start, where he was inspired to greatness, for them to have that opportunity as they prepare to do their performance to Higher Ground was just something extra special.
After their performance preview, the dance troupe took a tour of the museum.
You are so empowering in your own right and through your dance and just your mere existence. I just want you to know the power you have.
While this performance is a chance to prepare to dazzle the crowd during the show to come,
of course, practice makes perfect.
Our preparation with Mr. Garland, we learned the steps, and then we continue to practice it, continue to fine-tune all the details.
They say dancing in the Motown Museum dazzled them as well and will be an inspiration when they take the stage.
The more that we learn about the history of Stevie Wonder himself and the Motown legacy, I think has just been really wonderful to like continue to add that and to make it more special, more personally meaningful, which I think will come out in our performances in January.
And the Dance Theatre of Harlem will perform Higher Ground on January 22nd and 23rd at the Michigan Opera Theater. That's going to do it for us this week. Thanks for watching. You can get more information about our guests at AmericanBlackJournal.org, or you can always keep up with us on Facebook and on Twitter. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.
From Delta Faucets to Behr Paint, Masco Corporation is proud to deliver products that enhance the way consumers all over the world experience and enjoy their living spaces. Masco, serving Michigan communities since 1929.
Support also provided by the Cynthia and Edsel Ford Fund for Journalism at Detroit Public TV.
The DTE Foundation proudly supports 50 years of American Black Journal in covering African American history, culture, and politics. The DTE Foundation and American Black Journal, partners in presenting African American perspectives about our communities and in our world.
Also brought to you by AAA, NISSAN Foundation, and viewers like you. Thank you.